Why is it that one story, the core story of Pinocchio, can produce both one of the worst and one of the best movies of the year? There's such a divide there that it's evident almost no story baseline guarantees a movie to be good or bad. The deciding factor comes down to intention, presentation, and respect. The original Pinocchio film from 1940 is a simple and well-intended story. It's a starting point at which the conversation on obedience can and eventually must get way deeper, but with that simplicity, it is also easy to abuse its ideas. The key difference between these two 2022 versions of Pinocchio is that the Disney remake by Robert Zemeckis abuses the themes and turns the simplicity into a disgusting and harmful experience for children, whereas the Guillermo del Toro version is the most fleshed out, richest conversation on the topic of obedience that grounds the story in deeper roots. It is the ideal version of the story both thematically and artistically. A modern mindset I recognize is to consider children's-based entertainment to be less than, meaning that content which speaks down to their intelligence is right for youngsters. Whether intentional or not, which there is certainly a mix of both, this is creating dumb people who learn not to think for themselves and swallow whatever is put in front of them. This is exactly the idea that is shoved into the story in this Disney remake. They managed to ruin the ending of Pinocchio even though it's straightforward and already was laid out for them. They do so by lessening the ideas and making it simply about acceptance and Geppetto coming to terms with who Pinocchio wants to be. This is not about the benefits of obedience. It is a sly trick that teaches us obedience is good while shoving modern Disney propaganda down our throats. This is teaching us to love being mind-washed cattle. Del Toro promotes a more thoughtful, conscious examination of the virtue of obedience. Through the structuring and design of its story, it offers a far more applicable teaching and genuinely wonderful sequences than the opposition. Going hand in hand with either the promotion of degradation or the promotion of virtue, we see vast differences in how meaningful each version is. The remake by Robert Zemeckis holds no art style and lacks cohesion. When real puppets and puppeteers exist, they decide to use CGI in all instances and then rush the job on top of that. We can see this lack of cohesion in how each animal in the movie has its own art style, clashing with the others. In direct contrast, we can see Del Toro using real puppets with a cohesive look and style. He grounds the story in real history and location, truly respecting the source material and whose people it came from. It has a great sense for rich folklore. There's a meaning behind the Italian pine that Pinocchio is made from and the weight that it carries thanks to the political warfare going on during the World Wars. But in the Disney remake, they make a Chris Pine joke to explain away his name, because Pine can be a name. We all know who Chris Pine is, and that's the joke. The reference is the joke. A key feature of this movie are weightless references for the sake of making a reference, as if that's supposed to be satisfying. A common complaint with the Pinocchio story has always been that too much time is spent between Pinocchio and Geppetto in their house at the beginning before they set out on their adventures. The problem is ever present in this version, and maybe even more annoying because they waste time showing off Geppetto's clock collection, which are each crafted as a reference to other familiar IPs, which hold zero relevance or meaning to the story. This leads me to talk about how the Disney remake is a horrendous encapsulation of the main problems with assembly line filmmaking of the Hollywood industry in the modern era. The nostalgia-driven referential insistence, the over-explained ideas to speak down to people and encourage them to turn off their brains, the ruining of art to push propaganda into the story rather than channel ideas through the story itself. The lack of good presentation due to stripping down a director's role or identity, which is all clearly seen with Zemeckis' work here. Robert Zemeckis is actually very familiar with computer-generated special effects. His previous work, even from 15 or 20 years ago, has a very distinct style and presentation that speak his voice. There is no Zemeckis in this movie. There is no way I could pin that project to his name if I was unaware of who was behind the camera. This is a common problem with all modern Disney projects. Every weakness in the original film, like its pacing for instance, is present if not worse in the remake. They stay in the house at the beginning for 26 minutes and hardly accomplish anything in that time. This movie was not made out of a passion or a desire to craft something meaningful. All of these remakes are longer than the original films while doing much less. These movies are made out of a cynical desire to milk money out of previous passion and work from skilled artists. Thankfully, people are starting to wake up, but it's taken way too long and made far too much money to be excusable. I don't even love the original Pinocchio, but I am glad that it exists. It's not a story that really grabs me too much, but it has timeless elements and the animation is absolutely incredible. Disney formed their brand around this amazing animation, but now, 80 years later, it has eroded. None of their skill remains, only a factory. We see this even now in how they maim and abuse the very music that they magnificently crafted in the past. They orchestrate the themes in a way that muddy the compositions and make them less impactful and memorable, just because they think it sounds nostalgic. Alright, let's distance ourselves from the Disney remake so I can express why I find Del Toro's version of the story so great. We find a genuine desire to build something valuable here. New and wonderful music, breathtaking animation that puts a new twist on it, and the most appropriate for the story too, and a story recontextualized and rebuilt to hold more depth, fix the problems of the original, and all in all elevate the core ideas of Pinocchio into the most exceptional form it has ever been. It takes the simple foundation of the original, but builds upon it by putting these ideas of obedience under the context of virtue. Pinocchio at its core has always painted the potential horrors that could come from disobedience, but rather than letting it be a black and white picture, this version paints the same ideas through 3 separate father-son relationships: Pinocchio and Geppetto, Spazzatura and Count Volpe, and Candlewick and Podesta. We see that obedience can lead to virtue and right living when your father is a morally upright man with good intentions for you. We see that obedience can be abused by someone like Count Volpe, who guilt trips and beats Spazzatura into submission, treating him like his puppet on strings. People can lie about obedience so they can manipulate you selfishly. We also see that being obedient is not always the right answer when the authority you submit to is one that governs immorally. Joining the Nazi regime was wrong to young Candlewick, and he comes to learn that obedience is important, but under a figure like Geppetto who will guide him rightly, not his actual father. Having these 3 parallels throughout the movie provides a much more nuanced conversation that encourages the audience to think critically of their environment, of those who govern them, but then to submit when they are in line. Del Toro's version fixes all the problems I had with the original, like smoothing out the pacing and adding proper motivation to Jiminy Cricket. It is the most artistically inspired to me because of the meticulous handcrafted animation that takes advantage of real puppetry to enhance the themes. The music is powerful, the story is meaningful. As an end note, I want to say that I believe every single story is propaganda no matter how you look at it. Everyone, intentionally or not, will be expressing beliefs through their stories. There are bad ways to do it, like in this remake, where they tell you their beliefs to your face and break the story in the process. And there are good ways to do it, like in Del Toro's Pinocchio, where the beliefs of the artist are expressed through the journey of the characters. This is how you construct a proper guide for life. This is a fantastic movie for children, but more importantly, a valuable film for anyone who watches it. Stay tuned, because on Tuesday I'll be starting a series on the concept of originality, and the first video will cover Bones and All, which is currently in theaters. Thanks for watching this episode, guys. If you enjoyed it or found it informative, give it a like and subscribe for more screenwriting content. If you thought it could have been better though, give it a thumbs down and leave me some constructive criticisms in the comments below so I know to do better next time. Thanks guys, I'll see you later.